Hi, I'm Megan Ahart,
Hi, I'm Luis Camacho.
and we're going to talk about Europe and Central Asia and the developing nations within that region. So, a brief overview of this presentation will show you a map of the location of each of these countries and just in general where the region is, a little bit of the history of Europe and Central Asia and the developing countries there, how they've came to be and who's been in control of those nations. We're going to give you a brief overview of the general demographics, including the economy, the environment, and the society and culture in that region. And lastly, we're going to talk about what we think to be the main three problems that they face while becoming developed countries instead of being classified as the developing countries. So here you can see a map of the region, and the countries in color are the countries that are included as developing nations in the region. And the World Bank lists 20 total countries being developing countries in the region of Central Asia and Europe. So, a little bit of the history of the area. The earliest people there were nomadic tribes. They did a lot of trade and travel on horseback throughout Asia and Europe. And the earliest people there were in control of by the Chinese dynasties. And after that, Islam spread through the region and became one of the major religions throughout this area. Later, the Kievan Rus and the Mongol Horde were the big empires that were in charge. And after that, the SSR took over and kind of combined all of these countries into Russia's economy and Russia's political power and trade. So all of the resources from this area went to Russia at the time. When the Soviet Union broke up, each of these countries were broken up into the political boundaries that we see today that are still a little bit disputed, but mostly pretty founded in where those boundaries are today. But they didn't have any governments that were set up for them, and they didn't really have any economy or anything to bring the people together as a unified nation. So that's been a bit of a problem when overcoming challenges. And we can see that in the recent economic crisis, these countries have had a harder time overcoming and coming back and recovering from that economic problems. But lastly, we have a little bit of hope and progress in these areas. A lot of the countries have joined the World Trade Organization, which will just give them a bigger global presence in trade and economy, which will be a step moving in the right direction out of becoming a developing nation. So overall, we can kind of summarize this as 1,000 years of border change throughout this area. They have been under control of a lot of different countries and different powers. And there's a really cool YouTube video that you can go and watch. The link is below. And it shows just all the changing borders for the past 1,000 years in Europe and Central Asia. So that's a really cool thing to look at.
From the general demographics, we want to explain three main things. The first, well, the population is about 272 million people. The region has disparities between all the countries. You can see how has 74.9 million, while Macedonia has just 2.1 million. We can see that 51.5% of this population are women. That lead us to the important role that has the women in the region. We also can see that the 61% of the population live in urban areas, and their life expectancy is 72 years old. We can see how this the dispersion around the region of these countries. One interesting feature is the unemployment rate. The overall rate is 9.3% for 2012. However, you can see how many countries like Macedonia, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Serbia has a unemployment rate over 20% and 31%. One thing interesting about the general demographics is that right now the region is achieving the Millennium Development Goals. You can see how the poverty or extreme poverty is around 0.7%. The infant mortality rate is 18%, close to the goal that is 16. and the primary education is completed in a rate of the 98%. You also can see in the economic, general economics, the disparity between the regions. Even though the GDP growth is 3.9%, you can see countries like Kyrgyz Republic growing at 10.5%, Turkmenistan 10.2%, and you can find countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Bulgaria that grow less than 1%. You can see also this from the gross national income per capita, that is about $13,000. But you can see countries like Tajikistan and Kyrgyz Republic that is between 2,000 and 3,000. We can see from this the economic development that it is a development pattern when you see that the service sector is more of the 61% of the GDP, the agriculture is 8.6, and the industry is 30.5. There is important to notice here that the agriculture is getting lower. That gives a challenge for the region about the food security, how bring quality to the food that the people in the region is eating. We can also see a lot of trade growing, foreign direct investment growing. And still the region is importers. Even though they export, they are still prevalent importers. We can see the disparity in the economy in a specific example between Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. As you see, Kazakhstan, 3% the people is below poverty line, while Tajikistan is more than 47% low in the poverty line. 66% rural access to improving water in Kazakhstan, and 64% in rural access in improving water for Tajikistan.
So the general environment of the area is not very conducive for having an agricultural society. They don't really have much fertile land. It was a great location to travel and trade. When people first started living there, they have access to a lot of land in all of the rest of Asia and Europe. Istanbul has always been a big city because it has the port trade and the connection to Europe. And we see that even nowadays, major ports are being disputed, like the current situation in Ukraine. And some of these countries even have oil, so they have the oil resources to be able to trade and use their oil and just become one of those oil regions. Agriculturally, they grow cotton, and they also practice animal husbandry. And cotton is one of their biggest crops that they grow, but it's difficult there because they don't have as much water and good land, so they have to do a lot of irrigation, which has caused problems. They've even drained many large water bodies trying to irrigate for cotton, so it's not going to be a very sustainable practice for the future. So that's something they're going to have to think about when they continue to figure out what they're going to trade and be able to export from these countries. Overall, they have good access to drinking water and sanitation, so some of those earlier developing countries' issues have been resolved, and they can have a higher quality of life because of that, with good sanitation and drinking water access.
From the society and culture, we can see that the region has a common socialist legacy that gives them proof of the modernization and the transition to the market economy. This is an important part that the countries in the region have to deal with. Other important thing around the region is the low internal mobility and migration. Still, the migration is between rural areas in some countries, and it is not going from rural areas to urban areas. Additionally, probably would be with the Islam as a major religion there. As the graphic shows, the mobility is really low in terms of on the region. Also, we can see how the increasing women in the workforce, but this increasing has a lot of inequality. We found that the World Bank says that they cannot explain the earn of wages less for women than for men. This is not explained by education, age, location, or family. It is just happening that inequality, and there is a challenge from the region to enhance equity between women and men.
And this graphic, it actually shows that women are making less than men, and each of the things on the bottom axis is different countries and the values for how much women make with comparison to men.
Another major development related change is the economic competitiveness. Here you see a graph when there is the gap between incomes through all the countries in the region. So you can see the heterogeneity of the social inclusion and the challenges for the economic competitiveness. Finally, we have seen how the region needs to improve action in climate change, water, energy resources, and one of the things that puts pressure on that is the political instability. In this sense, we can talk about right now Ukraine. Also, we can see how the social movements growing in the region has shown an impact to transform the capital, to transform from the socialist tradition to the capital market and enhance all their institutions.
Yeah, and there's a lot of political unrest in the region. We always see different disputes going on, and a lot of problems are caused by warlords that are in the area trying to take control away from the governments that's been established. There's a couple of countries that are doing a better job at this, like Turkey, which has a democracy, but every other country should be working towards that instead of the stability that's going on. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.